Hello YouTube. So I wanted to do this video talking about presuppositions and what presuppositions are, and I'm sort of inspired to do this by I saw AronRa's latest video that he published it's perpetual projections of presuppositionalists, and in the description of it he quotes, right? According to Wikipedia, a presupposition is an implicit assumption about the world or background belief relating to an utterance whose truth is taken for granted in discourse. Examples of presuppositions include Jane no longer writes fiction. Presupposition: Jane once wrote fiction. Have you stopped eating meat? The presupposition is you had once eaten meat. Have you talked to Hans? And the presupposition is Hans exists. And then AronRa says, I have no such presuppositions. I wanted to make three claims here. First of all, AronRa has misread the Wikipedia article that he cites. Second of all, that we do have presuppositions all the time. We do employ presuppositions all the time, even in error. And third of all, that's a good thing. Which is kind of a hefty task, right? But I'm gonna try and provide some evidence for it. So first of all, let's look at the Wikipedia examples that AronRa provides. Jane no longer writes fiction. The presupposition is Jane once wrote fiction. Now, what AronRa does not get about that is that is a presupposition independent of whether or not it's demonstrable, right? So all a presupposition is, and by the way, I'm obviously not a presuppositionalist Christian, but all a presupposition is a relationship between two claims. So if I say, I don't know, if I say E equals mc squared, I am presupposing that there is such a thing as energy and mass and the speed of light. Now, of course, those things actually exist, and of course you can demonstrate them, and of course you can prove them. But it's a presupposition because I'm not currently proving them. You see what I mean? I'm not currently demonstrating them. I'm just taking them as given because I think that everybody can agree that those things exist. So that something is a presupposition is not contingent on the demonstrability of the thing being presupposed. So our language is constantly interwoven with presuppositions. In fact, I would go so far as to say that language functions on the basis of presuppositions, right? In order for me to communicate with you, we need to have a lot of shared experience, right? So Wittgenstein famously says, if a lion could speak, we could not understand him. The point behind that is that the experience of being a lion is something that's so alien to us that language just can't cross that gap, right? The shared background, which is a condition of possibility of language, is not present between a human and a lion, right? The point being, if we didn't deploy presuppositions, we wouldn't be able to talk, right? So we do employ them all the time, and mind you, we could say that that's presuppositions that are justified or that are valid or demonstrable or something like that, in principle, at least. But I want to point out at least a couple of examples of places where, let's say, justified but untrue presuppositions are appear, put it that way. And one place that it appears is in humor. And I'm going to tell 2 jokes. No, maybe just one. I did have a joke about a broken pencil, but it's pointless. But that joke, it's a terrible joke, but that joke plays on a certain presupposition, right? The presupposition of the setup of the joke. I was going to tell you a story about a broken pencil, is that we are in a certain language game, right? That is, we are in a space where I have led you to believe, falsely, that I'm talking about a joke. That's a presupposition. The punchline then proves that to be false, but it's pointless. Now what you realize there is that the presupposition is wrong, and the whole time you were misled, right? You're I'm actually telling a joke. I'm not talking about a joke, right? That's what happens. So this is called the Incongruity Theory of humor, and it's pretty much true of humor in general, that humor has to do with the incongruity between some expectation or presupposition that you have and what actually happens in the joke, what actually takes place in the joke. So I'm going to tell a really offensive joke now. A really violent joke, and a really disgusting joke with sexual overtones. So please, I warn you, right? And turn this video off if you don't have the stomach for that kind of thing. The joke goes as follows. I'm going to unpack it because I think it's violent and disgusting and shocking, but at the same time I think that the joke structure is actually more subtle than it appears. What do you get when you hit a baby with a 9-iron? A hard-on. But right. So now there are 2 layers at which this joke functions. 2 sort of strands, and this is what I like about the joke. It's much more subtle than you expect. The first strand is the obvious shocking nature of it, right? You expect sort of a violent and kind of gross joke, and then you get hit with a sexual gesture, right? You presuppose the joke is going one way, and then it shocks you in a different way than you would expect. In fact, that's how shocking things work, right? They lead you to believe one thing, or let me put it this way: our daily lives set boundaries on acceptable conversation that are presupposed in conversation with other people, right? There are norms at work. What something that's shocking does is to violate those norms, right? You come in with a certain view of what's going to happen here on the basis of some norms, and that presupposition is subverted, shown to be false. The other layer at which it works is the much more subtle layer, and that is, at least in English, I don't know if this is true about other languages, but in English, what do you get when you, as the setup for a joke, is a common thing, right? It's sort of part of the background of our language. It's sort of the background of what we understand as joke telling. Now, in a case where somebody says, "What do you get when you blank?" the punchline is going to do something to the object. So when I say, "What do you get when you hit a baby with a 9-iron?" you expect the punchline to have to do with the baby, right? The baby becomes some maybe clever pun phrase, 9-iron and baby crammed together, or something like that, right? That's what you expect. That's what the setup implies is going to happen in the joke. But what actually happens is that there's a change in the subject, right? There's a change in the state of the subject. Subject goes from non-sexual arousal to sexual arousal. That move is another part of setting up a presupposition and then showing that to be false. Now, what I want to say when I say presuppositions are a good thing is that jokes and humor in general wouldn't be able to function if we didn't have presuppositions, if we didn't presuppose things all the time. Jokes wouldn't be able to work. Neither would, incidentally, like scary movies. Neither would magicians, right? So magicians commonly say that skeptics are their best audiences, because a good magician will set up a trick so that the skeptic will think he knows what's going to happen in the trick and think he will have already figured it out, and then something over here happens and it's totally different, right? So the magician is somebody who plays with your presuppositions of the world. He lulls you into a state where you falsely presuppose something. And I like magicians. I like a really good magician. I think that they're cool. The point being is that it's not so much... So it's a good thing because these things wouldn't be able to function without presuppositions. But what it points to is something much deeper than that, which is that we as human beings have the tendency to make presuppositions all the time. And even though we might think that they're justified, they may in fact turn out to be false, right? We make false presuppositions all the time. It's often that we are led to believe X and that Y happens, right? So my main critique here of AronRa is to say, I have no presuppositions, right? It's clearly a patently absurd statement. Like, clearly it's just something that's very much a part of what it is to be a human being, to presuppose things about the world in one way or another. And yeah, and I think that all stems from, if I had to guess, it all stems from AronRa debating with presuppositional apologists, and then getting out of that the idea that a presupposition is unjustified or necessarily false, right? Or other epistemic things. When that's just not the case. That's just not what the word means. That's just not what we're talking about when we talk about presuppositions that we take. So yeah, I don't know how convincing that was. I hope that you enjoyed the video. AronRa is probably not going to watch this because he has like 2 million subscribers. But if he does, hi AronRa. And yeah, so have a good day.